Hello, everybody. I can see people
Hello.
hopping in. Welcome, everyone. Cool. I can see everyone getting in here. Welcome to our webinar today, our Offering Tree webinar. This one kicking off 2025 with our partner and favorite person of ours, Adrianne Jerrett. How to start a podcast, because Adrianne started her own podcast and we were in awe of it, and we wanted to bring her in and talk to our Offering Tree users about how to do it for yourself, because we know it's a big topic. So thank you, Adrianne, for being here.
You're very
And
welcome.
thank you, Andrew, in New Zealand as well. So we've got a bit of a time difference, day difference going on, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, let us know in the chat, just to let us know that the chat is working, and let us know where you are. It's always so cool to see where people are tuning in from. So tell us where you are in the world, and let us know, what do you do in your business, or maybe what are you thinking of for a podcast topic? That would be cool.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to.
yeah, sorry, Adrian.
Sorry.
It'd be great to hear from everyone. I'll check in on that in a second, and I'm just going to run through the housekeeping. If you've been here before, my name is Sinead. We do these Offering Tree webinars at least once a month, maybe more, trying to bring educational content out to people, always free. In the webinar, drop your questions in the chat. We'll send a replay out later. It will include all the links. Adrianne has a fantastic download to share as well. You can get a discount on Offering Tree, and we'll share more about that in the chat. And before I pass the mic over to Adrian, about Offering Tree, if you haven't heard of us before, we are an all-in-one software for wellness businesses, all the way from multi-location studios right down to your yoga teacher like me, who's teaching out of a local community center 3 times a week. You get your website, this full range of software where people can find out about you, they can read your blog, they can book for your classes, they can pay, they can learn everything about you. You can put email marketing automations. There's so much in the software, and you can host a podcast on the software as well. And I'm going to share some examples of that in the replay email as well, of Offering Tree users that are already podcasting and using the software for that. And today you can get this awesome discount that's on the screen, and I will drop that link into the chat. And now, without further ado, Adrianne, I'm going to stop my share, pass the mic over to you.
Jump over, so I'll get it all. And thank you everyone for joining. This is my first webinar I've done, so thank you for inviting me. And
I can see in the chat here, Sarah Lynn is here in the chat, and Sarah Lynn, one of your is an Offering Tree user. I believe that's you. And Sarah Lynn has a podcast as well that she hosts on Offering Tree. We've got Indiana, Buford, Andale. Hi, Sherry. Recharge Wellness and Yoga, Emotional Coaching for Business Women and CEOs in Norway. Hey, Renata. I don't think we get many people from Norway. Western Washington State. Hey, everybody. Hilton Head Island. Hi, Carla.
Hello, such a mix of people. That's very exciting. Thank you for joining today. And just check everyone can see my screen slides before I get started. Yes? Is it popping up, Sinead? Cool. All right. How to start a podcast. Welcome. Thank you for joining me here. So, if you don't know me, hi, I'm Adrianne Jerrett. I am host of the All Mats Taken Yoga Business and Lifestyle podcast and annual summit, which is effectively like a virtual conference for yoga teachers where we talk all kinds of business and also just lifestyle and growth sort of stuff, personal development as a yoga teacher. And I ran the summit in March 2024 and also in 2022. And then after March last year, I saw it was gathering quite a lot of momentum and I didn't want to let that slide. So about a week before my son was born in May, I launched the podcast as a way to help keep the audience engaged while I was on maternity leave, and then use the podcast ultimately to grow my audience and support the annual summit and grow that. So I'm not entirely insane. I did batch a lot of it, so I wasn't like actually actively doing it while I had him as a newborn. So we can talk a little bit about that as well. But outside of all of that and maternity leave, I am a brand and website designer, and I'm just about to start teaching yin yoga locally now in my postpartum state. So I'm very excited about that. And I just wanted to say a little caveat here in full transparency, and this is not an affiliate plug, but I did take a course by Elizabeth McCravey to help support me in launching my podcast, and just sort of answer some of the basic questions about it. She goes a lot deeper today in regards to monetization and covering more setup. So if you're interested, I definitely recommend to go check out her course. My goal for today's webinar is for you to see how easy it can be to set up your podcast and get it running. And I'm pretty much just going to share my entire setup. So if you wanted to, you could go away today and just completely copy everything I do and get started, because it's actually so much easier than what you expect it to be, and it requires very little investment. So the things that we will cover today is a bit about my story podcasting, the benefits of being a podcast host, equipment and software that you will need. I've got some tips on creating your intro jingle. We're going to look at a little bit about presentation and content, finding and pitching guests, and then I've covered a bit on advertising your podcast and content repurposing, which is something I'm still working on a lot as well. So we'll go into that a little bit though, but I'm still learning on those areas. And one thing I won't go into great detail is physically how to edit your podcasts, just because it's a huge topic in its own and it really varies depending on what software you're going to use. I will share some software that I use that uses AI to optimize editing, but it depends on the level of polishing the content that you want to do. It's not the be all end all for editing. If you want like something really raw, it might be good, but if you're trying to get rid of filler words. But a lot of this you can just Google your software, like how do I do this one thing? And it really doesn't have to be as complicated as what you think. So don't let editing hold you back at all. So this is my podcast, All Mats Taken, a podcast for yoga teachers. And the reason I decided to start a podcast, and I toyed with the idea of starting a podcast for honestly like 7 or 8, or it could even be 9 years. But I really didn't know what I should talk about at the start, and it kind of sounded too complicated. And it always just played at the back of my mind, though, that it would be a really fun way to create content. So as I mentioned, I wanted to keep my audience engaged while I was on maternity leave, and a podcast I was like, that's what I'm doing. I'll create a podcast off the back of the summit. And I just dived in to learn everything I possibly could. Between the time that I decided to start a podcast, which would have been end of March, I was launched mid-May. So it doesn't take a lot. And that was me batching a couple months, 3 months, maybe 4 months worth of interviews and some content as well, solo episodes. So it does take a bit of work, but if you're dedicated and you really want to do it, you can really like just invest some time and have it done quite quickly and up and running. I really love interviewing people, so a podcast felt really natural for me. And it also gives me a great excuse to introduce myself and have conversations with people that I find incredibly interesting and inspirational. So I really liked the content style, but I also wanted the potential to help grow my business and make the summit even bigger. And this podcast can do this in 2 main ways. So first you have searchability, so SEO, search engine optimization. You can use keywords and then hopefully your audience finds you through that. And I have had guest speakers and people find the podcast just through searching us online. And You can also interview guests, and if you have people that your audience aligns with them, then hopefully they will share it with their audience, and then you get exposed to new people and they'll find you that way. So that's been a big way to grow the podcast and find us. And I thought I would go into a few benefits of podcasting. And you might have noticed, I've definitely noticed podcasting is huge at the moment. Everyone seems to be talking about starting a podcast in 2025. They're already pretty big industry, but here's a few benefits for now that I think. So I think they're really great if you're drawn to creating audio or videos really big as well, then this is a good medium. If the thought of talking at people or creating videos of yourself is terrifying and not in like a not in a I just need to push myself, but in a I that sounds awful sort of way, then maybe it's not the best way. But if that sounds like something you think is fun, then I'm always for fun marketing. People will hear it. So people also buy from who they trust, and podcast is really great for growing this engagement. It helps you build an intimate connection with your listeners so they can hear your voice, you're storytelling them, you're taking them on a journey, and it often blends into people's lives in a really accessible way. So it's quite a unique way of absorbing content in terms of people are usually multitasking. So they might be cooking dinner or cleaning the house or sorting laundry or driving or something like that. We don't usually just sit down and we're like watching and listening to a podcast. We're incorporating it into our lives. So it's kind of a cool way of being in someone's home, if you like, and taking them on a bit of a journey with you. And I touched on this a little bit already, but they have a massive way to expand your reach through discoverability. So you've got platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. They have their algorithms that try to connect you with new listeners to find your content. And I also, while I was making this, found that there is a projection from ModPod that there'll be about 500 million podcast listeners out there in 2025. So there's a huge number of people listening to podcasts. It's a really popular way of consuming content. So that's really big bonus. Also, in terms of competition, if you're niche, I don't think it's too much of a thing to be stressed about. It's surprising how little listens you need to actually be one of the top podcasts. Obviously not Joe Rogan's sort of scale, but like quite high up there and actually have the algorithms recognize you. I think it's about if you get 25 to 40 listens in the first 24 hours, you're one of the top 50% of podcasts. So it's achievable to have your content found. Just take a quick sip. This is buzzing around a lot at the moment, but SEO is dead. I know I just talked about how it's a really great way of people to find you, but in terms of Google searching, we've got all of these AIs taking over, and it's getting a bit harder to be found through blog posts and just searchability in that respect. So collaboration is in. So if you are interviewing people, I think that is a really great way for you to find new audiences rather than solely creating a blog and relying on search engines for people to find you. It's also a really great way to build authority and network, and this is one of my favorite reasons. So you really get to find people that you're interested in talking to and pitch them, and it's honestly is just such a great way to build relationships with people. You can kind of skip all of the small talk with someone and dive into a sort of structured or open dialogue that really opens you up into something deeper, and it's really fun, and it's a great way to facilitate conversations with people. It's a good excuse to be able to be like, hey, come talk to me. And I've been really lucky to host a lot of people that I absolutely admire. And I've had quite a few people be like, "Oh my God, you're so lucky you got to talk to them. How did you do that?" And I just asked, and luckily they said yes, so that's very exciting. And I recently had Kate Lombardo, who is the founder of Yoga Renew, who I think is just an amazing person and yoga teacher and businesswoman, and I look up to her so much. And she commented on my Instagram, "So inspired by you," in the comments when I shared our conversation. So I was quite giddy about that. That was on Monday. So I was like, oh, fangirl moment. And I've also had people tell me that it is on their goal list to be a speaker at one of my events or on my podcast. And I don't know, that just means a lot as well to have created something that people are really excited to be a part of, and really they strive to be a part of it. So that's really cool. And I don't really have words to describe how much of a honor that is to have people tell you. And one thing that we will go into more is it's also a very low cost to entry. You also have like lots of flexible content creation style. So you can record from home and you can do a format that you really enjoy. So you could have a solo show or interviews, or you could story tell. There's so many possibilities as to how you can utilize this and have the most fun doing it. There's also a lot of monetization opportunities. So we won't go into it too much today, but you could get sponsored advertising, or you could generate revenue through like premium content. Think like having a Patreon. You could have merchandise, crowdfunding, speaking engagements. There's all kinds of things. And you can also use it to promote your own services, which is probably what I'm guessing most people listening today will be interested in doing it. So it's a great opportunity for that to help you grow your business. And I just quickly wanted to show you a few stats from my podcast in terms of the growth. So I post every fortnight, and I think it is really important to pick a schedule that feels doable for you. So even if once a month is all you can do, or if you want to do it seasonally rather than committing to every fortnight, then that's important. And this is the absolute most I can commit to at the moment with a 7-month-old at home. But I think there's a few cool things that I wanted to show you, and it's kind of hard to see in this. I should have done a smaller one than a whole year. But between like these spikes are obviously when I've released an episode, but you can see it's starting to grow between the episodes release in terms of people coming and listening. So it's not just me putting out an interview, sending it to my audience on that day, and then getting all the listens, and then that's it, nothing for 2 weeks. You are getting people finding it and engaging over a longer span of time. And I also just wanted to point out, so these are a couple of the interviews, how the episode can grow. So like the first 7 days I had for this one like 49 downloads, and then the first 30 days it was 78, and then the first 90 days it's 93, and then it's up to 98, and similar sort of trend up. So it is not just like a one and done type of content. It will keep growing, and my podcast is less than a year old, and I have done very little to promote it at this stage because I haven't had the time or capacity to do that. So it is just cool to see it keep growing and episodes keep growing, so they kind of have their own little ecosystem and keep on working for you, like a little investment. So they are an asset to your business. You don't need a podcast to run a business, but if you're going to, you might as well do it right. And that's what we will get into today. So, some basic equipment, and you honestly don't need everything that I've done here. So I've put it in US dollars. I have these are estimates because I'm in New Zealand, so I couldn't necessarily find all the US um, prices. But Blue Yeti microphone, as you can see in the photo, it's very popular for podcasting. That's what I use. It's got really good sound. It's really easy to use. They're about 130 US dollars. That's probably your biggest investment is the microphone, and sound quality should be your number one priority as well. So I definitely wouldn't go too cheap. You don't need to go crazy with a whole sound room, but a good quality microphone is key. I also have a pop filter, which I don't have in the picture, but you might be able to see in mine. It's this little thing here, and it just helps stop like the p, as I understand it, increases the quality of your sound. So you can pick them up really cheap on Amazon or wherever it is you shop for like less than $10. I use the Logitech Stream Cam, so it's a webcam. It was about 170 US, but I did recently upgrade to the MX Brio 4K, mainly because my one caveat with the Stream Cam is that the cable is attached to the actual webcam rather than being plug in, and my cable seems to be dodgy. So I had to get a new one. You don't even need a webcam, but obviously if you're interviewing guests, and it is quite useful to have the video for promo or if you're going to post it on YouTube as well. So I do recommend some kind of webcam. It doesn't have to be that expensive either. You can probably get a cheapie will do if you want one. And then you'll need a laptop, computer, mouse if you like, and a small quiet room. I use the study in my house that I'm in at the moment. I have heard of people recording in closets for the best sound quality because it's just like a small area that you can like pad effectively. But ideally sort of try to pick a quiet time of day if you can, all of that kind of thing. So again, sound quality should be your number one thing. People will always they'll tune out on sound quality before anything else. And that's the same if you're creating YouTube videos as well. Your sound is more important than the actual video. And then I just recommend before you get started, just check your mic settings. So ideally, you usually want the lowest gain possible and choose the mode that's right for your recording. So the Logitech Screen Cam, you might be able to see it in the picture on my screen. There's these little different modes and it'll depend on if it's just you or if you're interviewing someone, you can pick it. So I just like double check those things and sort of just Google them when you come to it because it might be different if you have a different microphone.
And Adrianne, there's just a question in the chat from Nikeva. I hope I'm saying your name right. The smaller, the better for sound quality.
Yeah, just because you don't want big echoes. If you've got like a really big, if you think of like a huge hall effectively going dramatic, it can be very echoey. And a small room, you've got less sound bouncing around. So just see how you go with wherever you are, but ideally if you've got like a smaller space, or you could even do it in your like bedroom because that's smaller than like your living room or your kitchen or something if that makes sense.
I know with one of the podcasts that we're sponsoring, Michael J, he had to record once in the bathroom because there was just endless construction outside. So he actually posted a story of him recording with his mic in the washroom in his house.
That's funny.
Get
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but I've heard of quite a few people saying that they would lock themselves in their cupboard. Obviously, you're not video recording if you're doing that, but it's just you and your microphone in your closet and with all your clothes and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, smaller ideally is better for sound. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of equipment, mic, laptop, so you've got something to connect it to, and webcam. And in terms of software, so this is what I use, so you don't need all of this. But if you are booking guests, I use Calendly, so I use the free version for this. You can use some other kind of booking software, or you can just talk to them. I find it easier to send a link and they can find a time, but it's free, so it's good and handy. I use Airtable forms to collect pre-interview information. So this is like their what they want to talk about, I ask them, or if there's anything they don't want to talk about, I ask them. Their bio, any links they want to share, their photo. I also like to ask them what would make this successful for them and what other podcasts that they've been on and why they enjoyed them. What was their favorite podcast they've been on before and why? And that's just to kind of like give me kind of some tips and help me learn and become a better interviewer. So this is also free. You could also use something like Google Forms or something like that for this. And if you're doing a solo episode, then you don't even have to worry about those two options. So I use Audacity for recording because I have a PC. This is free as well. And I just do very basic editing and recording on that. If I'm recording solo episodes, I record directly into this. And then if I'm recording interviews, I use Riverside. But I believe for Apple users, the equivalent of Audacity is GarageBand. And I think Apple users can still use Audacity as well. It's open source software. Yeah, so Riverside for recording interviews. I get the pro version when I'm recording. As I mentioned, I batch everything, so I don't pay for this every single month. I'll have like 2 months set aside to batch all of the interviews that I'm doing for the next few months. So I'm not paying for that for a year, so that keeps costs down, which is helpful. And the first batch I did all on Zoom because I was just used to that software and I really wanted to just start with what I was familiar with and not add too much of a tech stack on myself. And then the second time I tried Riverside, and I wish that I'd done them all on Riverside from the start because it was really easy to use. And it also gave me the little like snippet videos for sharing on Instagram. It sort of makes them, and it was quite easy to get the transcript and everything. But if you are comfortable with Zoom, you can definitely start with just using Zoom. And also, if you want something different for the transcripts, there's also other services like Ollie or Descript that are handy to help you edit and get transcripts, which I use occasionally, but I mainly just use Riverside for all of that when I'm paying for it, and I just batch everything to keep the cost of it down. And then I also put everything through Auphonic for final editing to improve the audio quality. And this is free as well for up to 2 hours a month. And then you can buy credits, or they've got some plans if you need to do more than that. For me, because I'm only doing 2 a month, that's enough. But if you're wanting to like cut out ums and things, I do that manually. I'm still working on my editing process and the best way to do it. So I don't want to completely steer everyone off on some terrible way of doing everything that's really slow because it takes me a while sometimes. But yeah, I can't figure out in Audacity how I like make everything even and exactly the same yet. I'm not that skilled at the editing. So Auphonic does all that for me. So yeah, it's quite magic. Give it a go. It'll even everything out and just like improve the sound and everything. And I use Libsyn for hosting and distribution. That's about $8 a month. So that's pretty much aside from Riverside, that's the biggest ongoing cost. And if you need more analytics and things, you can go on higher plans, but that one's enough for me to start with. And there's heaps of podcasting host alternatives out there. Libsyn, I believe, is the oldest. So it's not clunky, it's just like a little bit outdated maybe. It's not all fancy new, but it's very easy to use. And there's also things like Podbean and all sorts of stuff. So I'm told, I haven't done it yet, but I'm told it's really easy to switch hosts later if you decide to. And the main thing I'd be looking at when I was trying to figure out my host is what type of analytics you get for the plans, and do they do dynamic ads, which my current plan doesn't, but when I'm ready, I think I'll go up to that because they're pretty cool. So basically, you can insert like spots in your episodes where you want an ad to turn up, and that could be like your personal ad that you're creating for one of your offers, and then you can like put in the ad and then change it across all of your episodes wherever you've got these ads set in. So it means that if someone's listening to an episode from like 2 years ago, they're not going to be hearing your 2 years ago ads, they're going to be hearing your current ads. So it's kind of like creates ad slots that you can refresh anytime. So it is quite a cool idea. And one way of thinking about it that I heard was like to think about it like a digital billboard, if you like. So you can change the display when you need it versus like a traditional painted billboard where it's stuck. So the space for the ad stays the same in the episode, but the content can be updated remotely, which is pretty cool. I think that's a pretty cool feature, and it's definitely really useful for, as I showed you, people are going back and listening to old episodes, and if they maybe find an episode 2, and that's where they start, they're still getting my current offers. So I'm not doing that yet, but I think that is a really useful and valuable thing for business owners. And also, I believe you can host your I believe you can host on Spotify for free. I don't think I could in New Zealand. There was a reason why I didn't jump into it, or you might be only on Spotify. I just check the terms and conditions around it and for your country. But if you're like, I really have no money, I can't afford $8 a month, there is that option. So you can pretty much do everything in terms of software for free. And that's all you need. Basically, you need an idea, a mic, computer, in a room, and some recording and editing software and a host. That's it. I was just going to pause here and check if there are any questions about software or equipment before we jump into the next sort of section.
Said that she uses Riverside too.
I have had a couple issues with Riverside, I will say, but for the most part, 95% of the time, it's been really great.
And Adrianne, how much time do you estimate? Say if you've got somebody that you've interviewed, how much time per episode do you estimate it takes from like scheduling to live? How many hours do you spend on each episode?
I spend a lot, I think. That's probably more than maybe other people would. But so say you've got an hour episode, you'll have that hour for doing it. You might have up to an hour. You want to make sure that depends on how well you know them for researching them, creating really good questions, that kind of thing. So maybe 2 hours for like actually creating it. And then depends on the guest and how much editing I do. I usually edit myself more than I edit any guests, to be honest, because sometimes I look back and yeah, it's not that. You listen back and you're like, oh my God, I'm a bumbling dork. Like, why did anyone talk to me? So I have to edit myself more for my own comfort that people are going to hear it. And then I probably spend like up to 2 hours editing, but I'm trying to refine that process a bit more. And then I also separately edit the video. So then that's like another hour, but I use Riverside and you've got the transcript there. So I go through and I read it and then I edit the bits I need rather than watching the whole thing through. I really enjoy all of the talks, so I quite enjoy going through them over and over again because I have amazing speakers that have amazing things to say. So I do find it valuable. And then I have been currently working on getting the transcripts edited, which I need to find a better way. But I've been teaching Claude AI and ChatGPT how to edit the way I want them to edit so it's faster. Because otherwise
Yeah.
it's like 20,000 words. And I did
Mhm.
start doing it manually, and it's crazy just to make it like readable. Because if you look at like the AI is not perfect, doesn't always get what people are saying perfectly, but also reading a transcript versus listening to them are so different, like just our
Mhm.
speech patterns. So I just like to, I don't want to change what they're saying, but just tidy it up so it's all like grammatically kind of
Yeah.
correct and just easy for people to read, take out some of the filler words, like I tend to say that too much. I'm working on that. But yeah, I probably spend like 6 hours at least at the moment, but that's for the video and the audio and the transcript. But
Mhm.
I'm trying to work out better ways for my processes to do everything. Elizabeth McCravey, who I did the course, she was like, "Oh, I probably spend like 2 hours," and I'm like, I don't know how at this stage. But the video is very raw. It's only like very loosely edited, so that
Well,
makes
that ties into Nikava's question here in the chat. Do you think it's easy to start with audio only at first versus
yeah.
audio and video?
Yeah, so I have got I think I talked about that a little bit later in the presentation, but in terms of like adding all the things, I just pick one thing at a time and master that. And then when you're ready, if you even want to, go on to something else. So I recorded the video at the start when I did the Zoom interviews, but I didn't release video on YouTube for the first like few months. I just did the audio versions. And then I wanted to have the video up. So then I went back and I kind of edited it and figured out how to do those. So I'm still learning. And then I'm still learning, but I'm also batching all these things in a little bit bigger things than are sustainably achievable. Um, and then I only recently started working on the transcripts and deciding I want a blog post up with the transcript links. So you don't even have to do the other two. Like I would just pick one thing to start with, and once you're comfortable with that process, then pick the second process to move on to. I will say though, if you want to go back and do all of the old ones, you've then created a lot of work for yourself, which I've just done for myself. So you might just decide that from that point on you do it. But yeah, I'd recommend one thing at a time because otherwise it does get a little bit of just a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good advice.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's talk jingles. This bit was quite fun and I did find it quite overwhelming. But the keys here to take away, you want to find some royalty-free music. You could possibly use something from Creative Commons music, but basically this means that you're not constantly paying every time that your jingle is going, you don't owe someone money to say thank you. Some of them they all have different terms and conditions. You'll just have to read them. It's boring, but make sure you do because you don't want to get yourself into trouble when you're picking some music for anything. So you might have one that you really like, but you have like this was made, but I've just forgotten the term that I'm looking for. Like you've got it in your show notes that you've referenced that person and given them credit for it. So I found it quite tricky, but you can definitely change it later. And you don't even need a jingle if you don't want to. I made mine myself, but you could also get someone on Fiverr to help you do it. It's one thing that you're going to use over and over again. I did find it quite helpful for practicing my editing skills and just learning the software that I was using to make that at the beginning. And there's heaps of places that you can buy the music for your jingle. So I used Premium Beat, but there's other options, just Audio Jungle, YouTube Audio Library, Free Music Archive, Pixabay Music, Free Beats. There's quite a lot for um, royalty-free music. Just pick something at some point after you listen to like 50 jingles, they all start to sound exactly the same. So like think about what vibe you want and then listen to a few and then narrow it down. And then run them by my family and checked which one they thought sounded the best. But you may have to take a break and come back to this as well if it's just starting to get a lot, because you're like, oh, that one's good, that one's good. And you can always change your whole thing later as well. The other thing I just wanted to note is consider your timing and how long you make your intro. So if you've got a really long podcast episodes, you can get away with a bit of a longer intro. So maybe like a minute or a couple minutes. But if your podcast episodes are only like 15 minutes long or 10 minutes long, you don't want to have like a 2-minute intro each time. That's just taking up too much of people's listening time, and it's taking too much away from your podcast. So also consider the length of time that people forward skip. So often on the apps, it's like 30 seconds, and your ongoing listeners, they may not always want to listen to your intro. That's fine. But you don't want them to go skip twice or skip once, and then they're now like missed the start of your podcast. So it doesn't have to be precise, but just something to consider when you are making it, so it's easy for people to skip it and not like miss content. Yeah, that's pretty much my tips on jingles. So I've got a few presenting and content tips, and then we're going to dive into finding guests. So I wanted to just cover a few points because I think these are equally as important as sound quality, because you want the quality, but then people have to want to listen to it. So firstly, just be really niche. There are lots of podcasts out there. Why is someone giving their precious time to you? How are you helping them? Kind of just sort of consider that. And just being niche will help you clear away any competition, if you like. It's not going to be, if you're really niche, you're not competing with a saturated market. And I do think it's handy to go and listen to some other podcasts that you enjoy. It doesn't even have to be on your niche, just something you enjoy, and just make note of what they do that you like, or something maybe you don't like, and see if it's something you can adopt into your own processes and your own formats. Adopting and not just blatantly copying, obviously, make it your own. And then just be sure, if you are doing this, that you're doing it from like a curiosity research perspective, rather than getting overwhelmed and comparing yourself too much because they've been doing it for so longer and they're so much better than you, and end up halting your process. So just don't compare, but be curious. And then think about what style of format that you'd like to do, and you can mix it up. So I do interviews and solos. You might want to have like storytelling. There's one of the Myths and Legends is one of my favorite podcasts, if anyone's heard of that one. And it's all basically just a story every time. You can have a mix. And also think about how you sound. And I know it's very cringy to have to listen to yourself speak. I'm still getting used to it sometimes, but you can really hear the difference. And I think it's important to get used to listening to yourself speak so you hear when you're doing it. So you do want to make sure that you've got like enthusiasm and you have variation in your voice, and it sounds more natural. And it sounds weird, but try to smile when you speak, and you can really hear the difference. So I'll try do it. It's on like pressure now with people watching, but if you think about it, if I'm like, welcome to the All Matt's Taken podcast versus like, welcome to the All Matt's Taken podcast, like you can hear the difference. And yeah, just practice it. It does make a really big difference. And one of my podcast teacher, she advised when you're making like your episode plan to use bullet points, so you're not reading a script, so you do sound more natural. But I honestly really struggle with this, and because I just end up going on tangents and I say like and my crutch words way too often, and then it drives me absolutely mental when I'm editing. So I do write myself scripts if I'm doing a solo episode, and I think it comes out natural enough. I've checked with people and they said they can't tell that I'm reading a script. So I ultimately just want to get better at my speaking skills and practice that. So I'm not reading off a script. But for me and my brain, it helps me to stay organized and actually get what I want to say out. Otherwise, I just go all over the place. So have a practice and just see what works for you, I would say. And fun one, inviting guests. So I know it can be a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes to reach out to people, but if you've got a format where you are inviting guests, I'd recommend starting with someone that you are comfortable with or familiar with. So if you have a friend or a colleague or a family member who aligns with your topic, podcast topic, ask them first. You could also just do a practice one so you get a bit of practice and it's going to just sound a little bit more natural and the listener's going to hear it if you're a bit comfortable with it rather than trying to interview someone that's quite like a big in your niche on your first time and you're like really nervous about it. You can definitely hear it in my interviews. There's one person that makes me very nervous, and I'm not going to name it, but you can probably hear it. They're an amazing person. They're just like so amazing that I get really nervous, and you can tell from my end. But I've luckily got to speak to them a few times, so hopefully she couldn't tell too much. And then I'd also say feel a little bit daring for reaching out to people. So obviously you're not going to be pitching like Oprah or Joe Rogan or something off the bat, but be a bit more daring than who you think. Like when I ran my first summit, I only had a couple hundred people on my Instagram, and now I have over 1,000, but even in that world, that's still like nothing. But it didn't stop me pitching people that were kind of bigger and had like 30K plus followers, and they said yes. And it's a little bit of a push. There's a lot of people that I'm still holding myself back from pitching because I'm like, oh no, they're too big. But every time I do it, I often get yeses, and I'm like, that's amazing. So definitely just ask. You will 100% get ghosted by some people, and you will 100% get no's from some people, and that's okay because you're going to get some amazing yeses from some really amazing people, and those are the ones that you're going to want to talk to the most anyway. So it's really an honor, and just push yourself out there if it makes you a little bit nervous. So what do you say? How do you approach someone? There's a few ways you can go about this. If there's someone like completely cold to you, I would say it's a good idea to like engage with some of their content. You don't necessarily want to come out with the ask straight away, but in a genuine way, obviously. So commenting on their Instagram, like reels or whatever, just being present in their circle. So depends on where they are, but that's a look a little tip. And then I'd recommend if they have other podcasts, listening to those. You could read blog posts or articles about them, read their bio on their website, just so you know them a bit more and get to know them a little bit more. And then I have a couple pitch formulas here, and you could use this for more than just inviting guests to be on your podcast. You could also use a format of this to ask to be on other people's podcasts for any kind of collaborations. So my general formula for collaborations is saying hi and complimenting them so that you show them that you have genuinely like listened to something they've made. So if you've read a blog post that they've done recently, you can be like, hello, like I just wanted to say I really enjoyed this part. I thought that was very like interesting. Blah, 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 blah. Like be really genuine, show that you've actually taken time to engage with their content. That will take you so far. I get pictures constantly from people that are very clearly no idea who I am or what I do. And it's just so obvious, and I don't even reply to them. So it takes a little bit more time, but it will get you so much closer to getting a yes. Then you can introduce yourself and just make the ask and basically why you'd love to have them on. So if you are pitching other business owners to come on to your podcast, which you probably likely will be, or even just people that are experts in your niche, people are busy. You don't want to make it too complicated for them. So I've got a little example that I wrote. This isn't exactly one that I might flesh it out a little bit more, but it doesn't have to be more complicated than this. And I used to also pitch for a client that I had. One of my jobs for her was pitching to get her on podcasts, and we used a similar format to get her on. So basically, hi Jenna, I'm a big fan of your podcast. I found it fascinating when you spoke about the overlaps between modern positive psychology and the Vedas, and how, despite having different lineages and timelines, they've narrowed down on the same answer. And I'd love to have you come on my podcast, All Mats Taken. It's specifically for yoga teachers, and we discuss business and philosophy and help teachers grow together. I think you'd be a fantastic fit for the show as our audience interests align. I look forward to chatting with you soon. Have a lovely day, Adrianne. So it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. If I wanted to, like, I'd maybe flesh a few things out. If you were pitching someone else, to be on their podcast, I would just flesh out a little bit more as to like why you would be a really good and how you can help their audience. But otherwise, just keep it relatively short, keep it to the point. People are busy. Yeah. And also, if you didn't like hear, I would email them. I prefer email. It's a little bit more formal, but you can do this in the DMs if you want. I might also send a voice DM saying, hey, I just wanted to reach out to say I've sent you an email. I look forward to talking to you more. People usually like that personal connection that you give them. So that's one strategy. And that's like the little bit more formal strategy. But I have had a few guests recently that it's been way more chill. I've like come across them somewhere and followed them on Instagram and just reached out to say hi, and then saying like, I love your content, whatever, like, thank you for following. And they've been like, hi, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, oh, I would just love to have you on my podcast as a guest one day if you're interested. And I've had Nick Danu, who is coming up soon. I'll release hers in a couple months. She was like instantly like, oh, yes, send me the Calendly link, let's sort it. And within like 10 minutes, we'd booked an appointment and we did the interview like a week later. So it can be pretty chill, and then it's a really fun way of just like getting to know someone more and having like a connection that you've built. And in terms of just organization for inviting the guests, as I mentioned, I get them to book a time on my Calendly. Once they've done that, I follow up with a thank you email, and it's got sort of housekeeping with all the information that they need to know to record. So this is like, please use a microphone. Earbuds are okay to improve Apple iPod earbuds to improve sound quality. AirPods, sorry, you can tell I'm not an Apple user. Links to where will we be recording, and then the structure of the interview, so what they can expect, like a little like hello at the start, and then they introduce themselves and some questions, and then we'll have some time offline to sort of recap and say thank you. So what they can kind of expect from me, and then I'll send them a link to that pre-interview questionnaire. And then once they've returned the questionnaire, then I'll send them some some questions to prep with. And I don't give people an air date because I batch record everything and I don't necessarily know when I'm going to be released it yet. So about a week before the episode goes live, I will email them. I will send them the promo material. I'll let them know that it's coming out, and I'll check that they're happy to like collaborate on promoting and everything and say hi again. So that's kind of all it is, really. Is there any questions about guests and inviting guests?
I
No,
love
we're
all
good.
this info that you shared. Nick Danu is also an offering tree user. I'm familiar with him.
So many.
Yeah.
We we keep jumping across them. Country's awesome. That's why.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't have too much to say on advertising your podcast because I'm still very much in the learning phase and haven't this is my goal for this year is to dive into that more. So I am giving myself some grace because I do have a 7-month-old at times. But I would consider SEO terms not as like prioritizing it over the quality of the content and what it's about. But if there are some terms, keeping that in mind when you're creating your titles and including them in the descriptions just to help people find them. So basically just so everyone knows what that episode's about and who it is. Always tagging and collaborating with guests to help encourage them and make it as easy for them as possible to share it. Email your list if you have an email list. If you don't, start an email list. That's that's my top advice around advertising. You could get a lot more complicated than this, but at the moment this is all I do. And that's my goal for this year is to kind of boost that a little bit more.
Hmm. Michelle's just asking back on the other side, what does the questionnaire have on it?
To the guest questionnaire. So I ask them what they would like to talk about, what their topic is. Because I often go into it with an idea of what I want to talk about, but I do like to ask them because sometimes I've had some guests literally just send me all the questions they want me to ask them, which was very helpful, but I definitely don't expect that. And other people are like, oh, I've got a couple topics that I think would be great, and then I can like pick one. I also ask them if there's anything that they don't want to be asked about. So most people are pretty open books, but I have had people be like, I don't want to be asked anything political, which is fair. And I don't talk about politics anyway on the podcast. So I think that's quite helpful. I asked them to give me a copy of their written bio. I asked for their headshot for promo, any links that they want to share, any information about any freebies or lead magnets or offers that they want to promote in the podcast. I do let them know that I don't have an air date, so it is better to have something that's evergreen rather than something that's coming up. What else do I have in there? That's most of it. I do have a checkbox that I need to add back in that I took out for a while that is like, would you like to collaborate on something else to help promote it? That's another option that you can add. And I asked them that question about what would they like to get out of it? What would make, I think it's worded, what would make this successful for them, this episode? And what are some other podcasts or interviews that they've been on that they really enjoyed and why did they enjoy those? I think that's pretty much everything I ask. Yeah.
I love that question. What would make it successful for them? That's really, really, because then they're more likely to share it with their audiences as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. And then it's often interesting seeing people's answers as well, because everyone has like a little bit of a different motivation behind doing the episode.
Hmm.
And then you can kind of like tailor your interviewing potentially a little bit to help it be as successful as possible for them and to reach that goal with them and keep them happy.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I've just got a little bit on content repurposing, and I already kind of talked about this, so I won't go too deep into it. But the cool thing about having a podcast is there's like a huge range of content repurposing that you can do. So for All Matt's Taken, my audio episode, that's like the core content that I'm creating. And then I can add all of these other things on top of it as I can. And as I mentioned, I've been working on one thing at a time. So don't look at this and get overwhelmed. Just like pick one thing. And then when you're ready, and if it aligns, if you want to, you can add some of these other things into it. But it also just means you don't have to create all different types of content for all of the places that you are. If you are in a bunch of places, you can have one piece of content and just recycle it effectively. So I have the audio episode, then I have the video episode, which gets posted to YouTube, and then I have video snippets. So that can be shorts, reels. I'm not on TikTok, but you could do that if you wanted. And potentially you could post them on Pinterest as well. I'm working on the transcript to the blog, and the reason that I want to have it there is just so I have one place where I can post all the audio, the video, and the written content, and refer people back to that just to help people find it and just to make my life easier. And also because I love Pinterest and I want to help grow the podcast using Pinterest because that's my jam, then I can have Pinterest pins going back to the blog. So all of these different things. You could also turn the episodes directly into lead magnets, which I have done before, or create lead magnets for them to help you grow your email list. So you could have some kind of workbook if it aligns to go with it, or some kind of show notes, or something written that you could lure people in. You could even just turn the episodes directly into lead magnets, that kind of thing. So that's useful. And I'll say again, just pick one thing at a time with your capacity. Don't overwhelm yourself with it. And I think it's better just to learn one thing at a time and master it and be comfortable with that before moving on to the next thing. So that's kind of how I've looked at it. And then what's next? So you've got your podcast, why we covered some of the benefits, but what do you do with it? So my recommendation would be to grow your email list. I think in today's climate, the number one thing a business should be doing is growing their email list. We've got algorithms just always getting trickier, and AI taking over the search. And so email is just like that direct line with your people and your audience, and it's quite secure in that way. So I'd highly recommend in your episodes from the beginning, you have some kind of lead magnet or call or freebie or call to action to get people to join your list. I haven't done that. I'm going back and doing that as well on a lot of mine. And one of the things that I think podcasts is like this really beautiful cycle of being able to draw new people into your audience and connect with them on that really personal level through storytelling and being in their world, and then also engage your existing listeners. So for me, last year was mainly figuring out how to do everything in terms of editing and publishing and my processes, which I'm definitely still refining. And then this year, my goal is to help grow it and connect with the audience more. And so I can grow the summit and cover my costs because this is a lot of time involved, but I really want to keep doing it. So, and help as many yoga teachers as I can with the podcast. And that's me done. So good things take time. Be patient with yourself. And just, I like to think of these things as like planting seeds, and every little episode's like a little seed that I'm planting just to connect with new people, which that actually goes well with offering tree. And just there's some details if you want to stay in touch. So the podcast is All Mats Taken. You can find it allmatstaken.com. Search All Mats Taken everywhere. I also have Jerrett Digital. That's my website design business, which is currently in revamp. Next thing to be in revamp mode postpartum maternity leave. And you can find me at Jerrett Digital everywhere. Yeah. Thank
This
you.
is awesome. Thank you, Adrianne. I really appreciate you coming in here today and sharing all your know-how. It's really good to see it because it's a great podcast as well. It's a great listen. We're going to share all these links in the replay email. And if you're here for the replay, you should see a description box below where you can find all these links. But I have one last question here from Leslie, which is about, does the web builder for Offering Tree, does Offering Tree have a way to include a section where we can put the columns of images of all the podcasts we've been on? Something like As Seen and Heard On, and then have the image list. I would think that's pretty doable in our software. I can show you, I'll just do a quick screen share to show you how somebody shows, this is one of our users. Can you see that, Adrianne?
I can now. Yeah.
That's user Rose, who this is how Rose highlights her actual podcast episodes, but not, I know what you mean in terms of like as being on. So we would just have like image blocks on the website. Let's see what we can find on Rose's. And Rose, I know you're going to be watching this. You can have like your image blocks that could click into the episodes that you've been on as well. So it's a pretty, there's quite a few things you can do to build it out. We've got a few offering tree users that are using their websites for podcasts as well, and you can do your scheduling through it. There's appointment booking and Zoom integration and all that. Sherry is saying thank you very much. It was very interesting and very helpful. I agree. It was awesome. Thank you, Adrian. And Sherry says, I look forward to listening to your podcast. Yay! Because we're going to share all the links.
Thank you. Come and listen. It's fun.
And I'm just going to add that I think it's really incredible that Adrian did all this with a newborn baby and makes it look so easy to do it. It's fantastic. So yes, and Michelle's saying yes, the podcast is fantastic. She's a listener and she is saying thank you. Thanks everybody for being here, and especially Adrianne for coming in and sharing with us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I hope that was useful for everyone, and I look forward to seeing what podcasts that you create. Definitely share them with me when you've got it up and running, or if you have any ideas for podcasts, I'd love to hear them. I'm an open book. I always like meeting new people, so please feel free to reach out.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.